Hello, fellow
No.
superheroes.
And
Hello,
action.
fellow superheroes. It is Kelsey Dickerson with Geek and You Shall Find, the podcast powered by Superhero Faces. This is our third episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are joined by Brad Fay, who is the co-founder of Superhero Faces, as well as the director of Geek and You Shall Find. Please make sure to go look at it. It's on almost every streaming platform. We have Noah Berlin, who is absolutely amazing. Not the villain of this podcast at all, or any podcast in general. No villains here, as well as the sweetheart of all cinematic universes, Kate Faye. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We are going to talk about Eternals, which obviously has the number 2 spot of the Rotten Tomatoes MCU universe of the worst MCU movies. It's actually, I think, gone back to the number 1 spot. Last week we talked about Thor, Love and Thunder, which you'll have to see. You'll have to go take a look at what we thought about it last week and see our thoughts, but it clearly does not deserve the number 1 spot. But before we get into all of that, Noah, the non-villain of this podcast, please let us know what you have for nerdy news, because we are just so excited. There's been so much stuff going on. It's almost too much. It's too much.
Almost too much, but never too much, or else we wouldn't be doing.
It's never too much. It's not enough, actually.
Yeah. All right. So, starting off with nerdy news, first thing we're going to talk about is video game news. So it's not all just about movies, about TV. It's about video games too. So first off, Hogwarts Legacy, that video game, which is coming out PlayStation and Xbox and all those. It looks really awesome, but it's been delayed again. So it is now slated to come out on February 10th of next year. So hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers here that J.K. Rowling could just shut her mouth and not say anything else to make me want to not play this game, because I'm excited for it. So hopefully that happens. Next, there is going to be a Lord of the Rings Gollum video game. So if you've ever wanted to play running around as Smeagol, this game is going to be for you. So I personally have been very interested, just because I don't understand why they put names. But I'm stoked about it. It basically takes place parallel to the early chapters of Fellowship of the Ring. So basically, Bilbo Baggins gets the ring, leaves the cave, and then the game is going to start when Gollum leaves the cave trying to find Bilbo in the ring. So there you go. Apparently, it's going to be a stealth action game, more of a puzzle driven than combat driven. But there's also going to be a choice mechanic, which a lot of games now, role-playing games, have. And this will be funny because it's kind of like the Smeagol side versus the Gollum side. So you have to make the choices of which one you want to do. So it's like, I'm thinking, you grab a disgusting fish out of the river, like, do you bite its head off in a gross way, or do you let it swim by? I don't know. Is it Smeagol or Gollum? I don't know. But I'm maybe excited for the game. I'm not exactly sure.
My precious, right? Like
my precious. Yep. It's not going to be Andy Serkis voicing Gollum, so I don't know.
I was going to ask that.
Yep. Next, there's rumors swirling online that the distribution rights for the Hulk will go back to Marvel Studios starting next year. This is really big. They made a deal 15 years ago with Paramount, where Paramount gets distribution rights from the first movie that they released. So considering The Incredible Hulk was released 15 years from June of 2023, it was June of 2008. That will be coming next year. So this could be big news, where Hulk could actually have his own feature film and not just be a supporting character in movies like Thor Ragnarok and the Avengers and She-Hulk, which is coming out, and stuff like that. So it's pretty exciting if you're a fan of the big green machine, I guess. Next bit of news is about Warner Brothers Discovery, who is the owner of the DC Extended Universe. They had a shareholders meeting recently, and the president and CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, David Zaslav, laid out plans. They're going to come out with a 10-year plan to helm these movies and hopefully have a cohesive direction for it, similar to what Kevin Feige's done with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm skeptical for a lot of reasons, but it's a good start. I mean, they have a little bit late start, but I'm glad they're at least taking steps to move in the right direction there. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, that's a lot of news to digest, and I feel like you didn't even hit on like some of the biggest news of potentially.
Oh, I'm not done. I'm not
Oh,
done.
you're not done. Okay. I don't want to ruin. I don't want to ruin. I'm not going to be the villain of this podcast. So
I think you're already there. I think you're already there.
I am the villain of this podcast.
All right. So I'm moving on. Speaking of DC Extended Universe, Ezra Miller, star of The Flash, is in trouble yet again, this time for felony burglary in the state of Vermont. So I was thinking as I was preparing for this pod, I kind of want to play a game with you guys. We're going to play a game called True or Made Up. And this is going to be the Ezra Miller edition. So I'm going to read headlines of stories involving Ezra Miller's run-ins with the law. And you are going to tell me if you think that these stories are true or if they are made up. Are you guys got it?
So Noah, what is like what do we win or lose? Like, what is it? A chuggler? Like, is it like the next episode? Like, we got a chuggler, we get a shot. What are the stakes here?
I like this, but I like the control that I have over this and the power here. So I'll get back to you. We'll make sure that everybody watching will see what the winner or the losers get for this in a future episode. But I'm put on the spot now. I just want to get into the game. So first one, you ready?
Yes. Are we each gonna answer and then you tell us at the end? I'm not buzzing in.
Yeah, I'm gonna read the headline. Each of you will give your answer, true or made up, and then I will tell you if you were correct. Okay. So first one. Miller was arrested in Hawaii earlier this year and charged with disorderly conduct and harassment after an incident at a karaoke bar where he allegedly got agitated at a couple for singing the Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper song Shallow from A Star Is Born. Is that true or made up?
100% true.
I'm gonna say made up.
Kelsey?
Well, I don't know. Does this count? Like, I'm just sitting here like.
Wait, I'm changing it. Yes,
True,
I'm not gonna
true,
be the lone.
true.
Yeah.
Okay, once again, he was arrested for harassing a couple because they sang the Lady Gaga song.
Gaga.
Or made up?
I'm gonna say true. I'm gonna say true.
True.
It is in fact true. It is in fact true. All right. You all got it right. Proud of you all. Next one. In June, 2 parents obtained a protective order against Ezra Miller for allegedly physically and emotionally abusing their 18-year-old daughter. Miller was accused of giving the daughter drugs and alcohol and says that Miller displayed cult-like and psychologically manipulative behavior. Is that true or is that made up?
It sounds like
true. No, it didn't make that shit up.
Okay, so it is true, but I think the girl was a lot younger. So I'm gonna say
nuances. I was gonna say that this sounds very R. Kelly-ish. So I'm gonna say false because I think this is an R. Kelly headline.
Oh man, I don't want to change mine again, so I'll stick with true, but I'm starting to think it's false now.
Okay, well, I didn't say anything about him peeing on the woman, but, so it's not an R. Kelly headline, and actually is true. It is true.
Damn.
So far, Ezra Miller not looking like a great person. All right, next one. A mother and a 12-year-old child obtained another protection order that was granted this time by a judge. The family, as well as the neighbor, alleged that Miller came to the family's home in Massachusetts and began yelling at them about cultural appropriation. After the protection order was granted, he continued returning to this house and yelling at them once again about cultural appropriation. Is it true or is that made up?
That's false.
I'm gonna go with Kate. I think Kate has a good sense on.
I'm saying true.
Okay. Well, Brad, you would be correct. It is also true.
What?
It is also true.
I have never heard this story.
It made me think of that video. What was that video he filmed on his TikTok, Kate, that we watched?
Oh, that was it was actually a good one because he was hating on the KKK.
Right. So that's why I thought that's what I thought in this one. I was like, okay, he's politically correct.
How does he have the time, honestly? How does he have the time?
He's speedy. He runs around. Flash.
He's raising hell.
I mean, the crazy thing about this is I think that each of these crimes or whatever were all in different locations. So it does seem like he's speeding to a different location, raising hell, and then off to the next one, and they just can't catch his ass. I don't know. It's funny to me, though. All right, next one. True or made up? Miller helped a mother and three small children who he met in Hawaii, gave them refuge at his home in Vermont. Police then raided the ranch after there were claims that there was frequent drug use in front of the little children and that the home was littered with unattended guns and bullets. Someone even claims to have said that the 1-year-old child was found with a bullet in its mouth. Is that true, or is that make-believe? Made up.
I'm going with false again. I don't.
I'm gonna
think
say
that's-
true.
I don't think that's Ezra Miller. That's some other degenerate.
You're like, he's not that philanthropic, actually, in his crimes.
Kelsey, what's your guess?
I say true. I say that's true.
Okay, well, Kate, you are incorrect. That is also true about it.
Noah, what? Everything is true.
Listen, I did not make up these stories, obviously. Ezra Miller does crazy things. So there we go. Last one. You ready for the last one?
This
Brad
is
is
true,
winning
Noah.
this
I
time.
swear to God.
I'm batting it. I'm batting it.
I know. I was doing
That
like
is better than-
logic.
All right. True or
It's like-
make believe? True or
It's like
make-believe?
on a test, like you have to like mark either B or C for all of them, and you'll get like at least 50%. Like this is not the case.
Exactly.
Not the
Like
case.
all of them are true. It has to be false.
This is not a Scantron, I promise you. All right. Number 2 pencils not needed for this game. True or make believe? Police were called to Miller's home at 3 a.m. in response to a neighbor's noise complaint. When the officer arrived, he found Miller playing the bongos while naked in front of a window, while their friend clapped and danced along. Miller pushed the officer, who proceeded to spin him around while still naked, handcuff him, and take them to jail. Excuse me. Is that true, or is that made up?
I'm gonna say
Bongos,
that one's
3
made up.
a.m.
I'm gonna say that one's made up. Unless you just picked all true ones. Like that is too much.
That one is too much.
I know, right? I know. I'm like, he
Yeah, I
didn't
feel
play
like-
bongos naked.
I feel like that's definitely something that he would do. But I also feel like Matthew McConaughey got arrested for that,
Ooh.
right?
So maybe that's a Matthew McConaughey.
Or am I
one.
slandering right now?
You know
So
what? Like
what's it?
honestly, like I agree. No, like I think Brad, like drawing the like that's too much. Like I think I'm gonna say this is false because I'm gonna go with Kate on this one and be like, oh, this was another like person obviously having a great time. Maybe PCP. All right. Yeah, a little like having a good time. Yeah.
All right. Well, that is the answer. So, Kate, I have to say you win the game because it was indeed Matthew McConaughey. That was the one false one about Ezra Miller.
What?
So
You didn't
that
win
was
the game.
I was
got
gonna
everyone
say,
right.
how did I win?
You won because you knew not only was that it was false, but you got the bonus points of Matthew McConaughey. Therefore, in my book, hey, this is my game. Kate wins.
Hell yeah.
But
Honestly,
fans,
yeah.
if any of you are listening to this and think that this sounds kind of problematic, this sounds like Ezra Miller, maybe not somebody that a huge company would want to put their money behind, don't you worry, because the DC Universe Flash is still planning on being released next year in 2023. So don't
Okay,
flash.
so there's another thing. Obviously, this was like more of a social media type, like, oh, maybe it's like some kind of like this is true, but it could be true, not true, whatever. Someone like hypothesized that there was the potential that WB was harboring Ezra Miller as a fugitive and wasn't letting other people know that they were there as they were filming. And I was like, honestly, like after, especially that you say was that 5, 6, 7, like news headlines that were clearly geared towards him or them, like geared towards them, like I can see that being true of like being like, WB is like totally in on this harboring a fugitive. Like they're like
I want
basically
to
Mar-a-Lago.
stop you right there. You are besmirching the good name of Michigan J. Frog, who has been accused of nothing other than being very racist in the past. So you need to
Yeah.
be careful what you say about Michigan J. Frog.
I think the frog is like he has nothing to do with it, so I would never say that. I would say the producers and like the directors that.
It's the WB.
Okay. I had no idea what you were talking about first.
You don't know? Oh my God, you don't remember that? Oh, the slightly racist frog that danced and introduced
His name's Michigan.
Top hat.
Michigan J. Frog. You don't remember that?
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't his name in like the original Warner Brothers cartoons.
Maybe
Brad.
we'll do a podcast all about the history of Michigan J. Frog next.
Yeah,
We should actually. And like Brad is gonna host it.
yeah, we're gonna do a documentary about Michigan J. Frog.
Oh, very
Speaking
good.
of documentaries, please make sure to go watch Geek, and you shall find it's almost on every platform that we have. It obviously has a lot of great information there. And it's why we've spearheaded this podcast, because we wanted to make sure to dive in more into a lot of different things, including the MCU universe. So today we are talking about Eternals, which was originally ranked as the worst MCU movie on Rotten Tomatoes. Last week we talked about Thor: Love and Thunder, which has been overtaken. I think a lot of Thor fans have come into its rescue because we had some opinions on it, as does everyone else. But Noah, for anyone who's not familiar, I've watched it twice. I'm confused. I don't know what Eternals is all about. For anyone that is in the same boat as me, where are we at with Eternals? Who are they? Where are we at in the MCU? Please help people like me. What is Eternals? Where are we at?
That's a great question, because this one's pretty unique. So Eternals were originally created by Jack Kirby back in 1971 and then made their debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in 2021. The storyline of the film spans thousands of years, tells the story of quote unquote Earth's original superheroes, a group of ancient superpowered beings created by godlike cosmic entities called the Celestials. So the story begins when the titular characters first arrived on Earth, exploring their time in Mesopotamia in 5000 BC. That's when they first came to Earth. Then throughout history, Babylon, 275 BC, Hiroshima in 1945, and so on and so on. A lot of other important times throughout human history. The story is told in a non-linear fashion, jumping back and forth through the adventures in the past, and then the team splitting up and then being reunited in the present day MCU when the planet comes under threat once again from the deviants who are their enemies throughout their history. Much of the plot focuses on the characters' influencing of humans' evolution and their development beginning several millennia ago when they first arrived aboard their ship, the Domo. So overall, this film seems to be the most disconnected from the MCU as a whole, more than any other project we've seen so far. It's partly because these are entirely new characters to the vast majority of the viewers. A lot of people know nothing, myself included, honestly, about the Eternals prior to this movie. But also because up to this point, these characters have not interacted with any of the other Marvel characters in any of the other Marvel movies. So throughout the movie, there is dialogue about things like what they were doing during the whole time of the battle against Thanos. Spoiler alert, they did literally nothing. They talked about who they think will take the lead of the Avengers now that Captain Rogers and Tony Stark are now gone. And they also reference Odin and Laufey, who is Loki's father, at some point. So on one hand, Marvel's Eternals is a blank slate. It's a true origin story and an introduction to over a dozen new characters, from the Eternals to the Deviants to the Celestials to Jon Snow. Dane Whitman, I believe his name is. Yes, Dane Whitman. But with that, has the very ambitious task of creating a cohesive story with a huge cast like this. So were they successful? Were they not? That's for us to debate today.
Yeah, so we'll definitely get into that, and we're really breaking it down of why we think it has this rating, if we think it deserves it. But to your point, so for anyone that's not familiar, I would say deviants, what are deviants? Just for anyone that's not familiar, before we get into our MVP, LVP.
You want me to help you out?
Brad, if you know this,
Yeah, you want me to help you out?
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
I think so. The Celestials basically put them here, and their original I forget what their original task was, but it basically started to evolve and started to become the apex predator and
that's what it was. It was
yeah.
It was the fact that they needed the Celestials needed humans to continue to grow on Earth. But Earth already had apex predators, dinosaurs, animals, shit like that, right? So they brought in the deviants to just take out the apex predators so humans could be left on their own. The problem was deviants began to evolve, and then they started killing humans.
Yeah.
So the Celestials created the Eternals to basically do what they originally planned for the deviants. Eternals would come to Earth, kill the deviants, and leave humans and assist humans throughout evolution to continue to grow and populate the Earth.
Got it. Okay,
That
thank
was
you so much.
a lot better than I thought.
On the spot like that. I was like, Noah, you are left with knowledge today. I'm the villain of this podcast, so I got to tell it. So Brad, like obviously, like you did a great job. Thank you so much for explaining what Noah couldn't. No, just kidding. So Brad, for you, I mean, obviously, like, you know, this is the first time that we're seeing, like, you know, a lot of different characters, the Celestials, the Eternals, like all these different things are like being introduced to us. Who is the MVP for you in this movie?
So I had for my MVP, I had just the overall like characterization of the characters. The fact that like you and Noah both pointed out, they are introducing so many characters at once. It'd be really easy to just have them kind of fit like cliches. Oh, he's the funny one. He's this. And like maybe there's that a little bit, but I really felt like you got a good understanding of who each character was, like at a semi deeper level, which would be really hard to do when introducing like a dozen new characters. I felt like we walked away kind of knowing like this character is this, but also that. So I really just like the characterization that was kind of done, and like that each character had a little bit of depth, which is really hard to do in like an ensemble cast where they're like, you're the tech guy, you just do tech stuff. Like he was more than that. So I really thought they did a good job of that.
Just like you're the puppet guy.
I'm the puppet guy. That's my
Great
thing.
call.
Like
Yes.
that's all I am.
Oh my God.
All right, Kate, Noah, was there any MVPs for you?
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead, Noah.
Okay, I'll take it. So for me, the MVP was Cersei. And was it because she ended up killing Tiamat, the Celestial, at the end? No, that is not why. It's because Gemma Chan is just so attractive, and I love her. And
I knew you were going to say that she was hot. I knew it. I could feel it in my bones.
Listen, every scene she was in, I wanted more of. I like her very much. She's incredible. I love her. Also, though, honorable mention for me, the MVP of the film could be Makari. Makari, played by Lauren Ridloff. To me, she stole every scene that she was in. She essentially is kind of like the Flash. I mean, she has super speed and all that, but she was so much more than that. She's a diverse actress, half Black, half Mexican, deaf, and they made her. I don't know. They portrayed her in a way that was just incredible with the way she still acted. She obviously didn't say a word. She's deaf, but
yeah,
she was so good. Her fight scenes were unbelievable. The chemistry that she had acting alongside Barry Keoghan, which is plays Druid. I think that was such a small part of the movie, and it really wasn't even important. But the chemistry that they had together was amazing. Makari, I thought, was just awesome.
you're right. That's a good point, because she's so good that I remember being mad that she was the last one that went back to like recruit. I was like, I want her in this. Like, go get her now. She's not gonna like argue. She's not like one of the one. Like there were some people that they were like, oh, he's gonna be really difficult. He's not having it. You know, so I didn't see any reason why they waited so long before they got her. But yeah, I remember thinking the same thing.
Brad's like, she knows her place. Just kidding.
Never.
All right, Kate, what would you say? Who's the MVP for you?
Okay, well, I also had Cersei, but because she saved the world.
Same reason, Kate? Same reason?
I mean, she's
hot.
gorgeous. Like, she is beautiful. So she's obviously like nice to look at throughout the movie, for sure. But she also did save the world and is a total badass. So she's one of my MVPs for that. But I also had maybe an unlikely one, which was Druid, because I thought it was cool that he was the only one that was questioning this authority throughout the entire time that they're there and what their purpose was, because they had to explain a little bit more. Like they had the Ajax, which was like the leader of their group, and just kind of telling them like, hey, don't interfere with humans. You know, we're here to just save them from these deviants, and that's it. And he's kind of like, well, I have all these powers that can like really help people and like save people and all this. And she's like, no. And he's kind of questioning that throughout the whole time. So I thought that was really interesting, and I liked that about his character. And then also I had Thena because I just love her. I love her character. Angelina Jolie was so good and her fight scenes were so awesome. Like I just really enjoyed watching that character, especially, you know, when she had the Mad Weary or whatever that's called. It's a weird name. But yeah, I just really liked her trajectory through the movie and thought she was
Especially like speaking of hot, like Angelina Jolie to me like keeps on getting hotter and hotter. Like how is that
she
even
was
possible?
gorgeous. Like can't take her eyes off of her.
Absolutely gorgeous. I agree with you, Kate, especially because like obviously like they have this whole idea of like these gods forget about their past lives, and that's why like they start with like a new, like obviously, and so like being able to watch them kind of come into their own and like still kind of find themselves, I think is like a great MVP for me as well. But obviously this movie, I think it has a 46 or 49%. It's either 46 or 49. I think it's 49. It's definitely less than 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. It has reclaimed its #1 spot in the worst MCU movie on Rotten Tomatoes. Obviously, we have found positives in it. We talked about our MVPs, but who are the LVPs or what are the LVPs? Brad, let's start off with you because there's definitely some LVPs in this movie.
I had the deviants. Just I don't like the mindless, like, you know, and obviously, you know, the leader of them or whatever that was like absorbing their powers. He, you know, evolved and became a little bit more and was able to talk. But I'm just not a big fan of when Marvel does the mindless robots running around and the Avengers have to fight all these robots. And like, I want a villain with like a little bit more depth. And it, you know, they were just like advanced lions and bears, and it just made for, okay, so we're gonna have a bunch of like mindless fight scenes where I don't really, you know, the villain's not interesting. It's not like a Doctor Doom element where I understand what they're doing. I'm like, okay, I'm watching these people like beat up on these apex predators. And you know, I just thought for like a long time that kind of slowed down the movie, and I didn't think all those long fight scenes were necessary because we obviously knew like they're gonna end up okay. So they just didn't add anything to me.
I completely agree with you, actually.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, they didn't exist for anything other than advancing the story because we needed action scenes to advance to the next story beat, right? So like they just like, oh, they're all talking, and then all of a sudden, oh, the deviant showed up, and then now they have to fight them, and that's gonna take us to the next beat. So it was kind of, I agree with you about that.
Yeah, it's almost like a shitty version of Transformers, right?
There was a shot where I forget which, no, I think it was one of the Celestials. There was a shot that I was like, that is Megatron right now. Like, but I think it was the Celestials. I did learn after watching it the second time and doing like a little bit more research that in the comics, the deviants are more humanoid. So they are kind of like how that one guy was. And like that was like some criticism that like fans of the book went of like, yo, the deviants are cool. Some of them are like not as evil as others. There's like a little bit more depth, and they took them and just made them like ferocious beasts, and that was it. So I could definitely see as like a fan of the original kind of being upset. Like you took these really like layered characters and just made them like lions and tigers and bears. Oh my.
Especially because they were trying to make it like, oh, like every like very momentous occasion in human history, right? Was like, okay, they were being overseen by the Eternals. So obviously there had to be like a villain, like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like these like whatever, like these, I guess, what would you like robot? Like are they robots? Like what are they? Like
Creatures.
Yeah,
creatures? Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like, you know, like obviously like throughout history, like they are there. So it makes more sense that they had a human element to them versus just being like these very dumb, like, oh, whatever, they're just here. And like they're like the apex predator because obviously these humans are predators ourselves, right? Our ideas and like, you know, trying to like, you know, crash like other like or like the ideals that like we would think in like history.
Do you think they just took all the animals who didn't make James Cameron's Avatar cut and then just like use those? Like all those
I
actors
mean,
that didn't get hired for James Cameron's Avatar just got cast to be, and they're like, oh, we'll take you. You could be a deviant.
they were supposed to be blue.
You think those were done by actors?
Yeah,
the
like
only thing And by the way, like I said, I agree with you. They could definitely be the LVP. The only thing is that really they are not the real villain of the movie. Like, were the Celestials the actual villain? Was Icarus the actual villain? You know what I mean? Like, they were just a method to advance the plot, which makes them even more pointless, to be honest, but less important. So I don't know. I mean, I have another LVP for me. I thought that in general, when there was 10 Eternals, each of them are unique with their power set, their personalities, what they do to advance the plot, all that stuff is interesting to an extent, some more than others. But the least interesting and by far the LVP for me was Sprite. I just think Sprite was a whack character, which is
She's the worst.
I mean, like, what do we know about Sprite? She looks like a child for some reason, and she doesn't like that, and so she wants to grow up. She's
supposed to be like, is she like Tinkerbell of like this universe? Like,
they talk about that. They talk about that, but she loves Icarus, and she's jealous of Cersei. But like, there's really nothing to her. Like, she does cool illusions. Like, that's her power is cool, I guess. But as a character, she just sucked. And then she stabbed Cersei, which I was personally offended by.
You wanted to stab her?
This is a family friendly podcast.
Please.
But yeah, Sprite sucked.
I mean, that's really like, yeah, sorry, Kate, what were you saying?
I was gonna say, like, she was obviously my LVP. I feel very strongly about this. And here are my bullet points on her. She complains for 7,000 years about being a child, which I know, listen, being a teenager sucks, but like, you have 7,000 years to deal with this. Like, get over it. She turns on her best friend, well, what seems to be her best friend, Cersei, for Robb Stark, Icarus, who doesn't even love her. Like, he doesn't like you. And then she is a badass Eternal. Like, she has cool powers. She gives it all up to get a boyfriend. Stupid. And then even when Cersei is nice enough to turn her into a human, she complains about having to go to school. I can't with Sprite. You're done.
Yeah, let's recap that real quick, Kate, because you are completely right. So, all right, last we see Sprite, she tried to murder Cersei, right? Tries to kill her, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," whatever. Tries to murder. Cersei gets away, doesn't matter, saves the world. And then they're all celebrating together. Sprite rolls up like, can we just forget about what happened to me or what happened to her? I don't know, like, no big deal. Doesn't say anything. And then fucking Cersei, sorry. So, Cersei comes up and is like, "Hey, I am real powerful. I could make you a human." And she's like, "Yeah, make me a human." It's like, damn, you greedy.
Right? What? Like, you're an Eternal. Like, why do you want to be human?
Like all of a sudden now you're in a position to be asking for things you just stabbed her 5 minutes ago. And then she gets what she wanted, and then she's complaining, "Oh, I gotta go to school, social studies class, whatever." Man, Sprite sucks.
Damn, you greedy.
And actually, listen, I won't mention it, but we have a segment later coming up. Best line. My favorite line of the movie was when Kumail Nanjiani, Kingo, was just like, Druig was being weird, and he's just like, "Druig sucks." That's the way I feel about Sprite. Sprite sucks.
Dude. Okay, well, let's just roll into it. Like, we're gonna go back to like
I skipped way too far ahead. I'm throwing everything off. I'm sorry.
No, I think we definitely covered the cringiest moment is just any moment with Sprite, because she fucking sucks. Like, she just does. Like, to your point, like, you guys were absolutely correct. Like, she could be so cool, but they just turned her into this very like stereotypical, like, "Oh, I'm a teenager, like, I'm mad and I don't like this." And it's like, okay, like, as we've already established, like, clearly these Eternals, every single time that they they reanimate. So Sprite has been like this for centuries and lifetimes at a time. So she's probably stabbing Cersei every fucking 100 years, and then Cersei's probably making her a human and she doesn't like it. Like, that's bullshit. That's a bullshit in my mind. Like, fuck off. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you would just, like, you're shitty. Like, I'm sorry, you're shitty. It's almost like, it reminds me too of like, like Interview with the Vampire, where like they turn like, you know, they turn Kirsten Dunst's character into a vampire, and she's like 12 years old. And I get with that because like you literally like can't kill her unless like you stab her in the fucking heart. But like for her, it's like she is literally like she has all of these emotions that have built up over hundreds of years. But like she knows all of them, and like those are a part of her forever until she dies. But like with Sprite, it's like you're reanimated every however many times it happens. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it just makes no sense to me. It makes no sense. And she is the LVP. She is the cringe, and she is just terrible. Like she could have been cut out of that movie, and it would make it 100 times better, and probably cut the movie by like 30, 40 minutes. Brad is like so not happy about this.
I feel like we said all we need to say.
Man, I
We
think
said all we need to say.
I don't think she
We're
deserves
heated
this
about
much
this.
hate. Yeah, I don't think she deserves this much hate. She ain't great, but damn.
We're moving forward though. We obviously we all agree we dislike Sprite very much.
I'm not even gonna say that. I'm
Brad is
taking a
Sprite
neutral. I'm
apologist.
Switzerland on this.
The three of us hate Sprite. Brad is a Sprite apologist.
Don't roll me into this.
Yeah.
Okay, Brad.
so-
There's also been other stuff within our friend group that you are Switzerland on, and you have been wrong about it. So let's just leave it at that.
All right, moving on. So
Moving on.
we all established we, for the most part, dislike Sprite. What other things in the movie that we haven't talked about so far, you know, did you not like? Did you think was either cringy or just, you know, you disliked in general? Like, what do you feel about that?
I've got a really heartless one. The
Oh, you
children.
were like talking mad shit about us, like of like a character that clearly deserves hate, like, and now
I'm not saying I liked her. I'm
Spirit.
just saying like I wasn't like that mad about her. Like she didn't like
Okay.
infuriate me like she clearly infuriated some on here. Like that's all
I'm
I'm
not
saying.
losing sleep over Sprite, so it's good. It's all right.
My like other thing that I didn't like was just the laziness of children being saved all the time. Like as terrible as it sounds, like it seems like every scene when the deviants appeared, they would kill an adult really quick and then look at a kid and then they were about to get like I swear they did this 3 or 4 times at least. And that's when the Eternals came in. And I was like, all right, like get creative with it. Like there's got to be other threats in life then. If they don't show up now, this kid's gonna die. It happens so many times. It happened in the opening scene, the guy's fishing, gets eaten, it's about to get the kid. That's when the Eternals first show up. Okay, cool. You're establishing they saved the little kid. But I swear they went back to that well like 3 or 4 times. Every time the Eternals came, or every time the Deviants came, they killed an adult really quick. And then when they were about to get the kid that was accompanying that adult, that's when the Eternals popped up. And the kids seemed to give no regards to their parents that just got either. Like they were just like, thank you. Here's a weapon. Oh, cool. Like,
Listen, I expect things like that to be said by the kid hater.
I
Kelsey.
know.
I'm
I know.
surprised to hear you say that.
That's how bad it is. That's how like overdone it is. Like Kelsey would get mad if that happened like one time. Like, why'd that kid get saved? But like there
Y'all
were
hated
barely
it,
any
first of
children
all.
in this movie, and children were getting saved left and right. Like I'm like, there aren't kids in all these situations. Like, stop. So that was
Okay,
to
I
me.
would just say like I agree with that, like 100%. But like because like they obviously are established as like the protectors of humans, the future of humans and like humanity is like kids. So like I mean that makes sense, but it's also like it puts that onus on, or it puts that onus on like, oh, like in movies like to be the most important thing, right? And it's like that's not always the case. Like so I agree with you, Brad.
Yeah, it just seemed like they were making it like, oh, this is so. I'm like, I'm not like I don't know. I'm like obviously too old for this, but like when you're a kid, you're like, oh my God, the stakes are so much higher. This child, like, oh my God. But I'm like, I'm old enough now, like these are movies. So like you should have different techniques to kind of like raise the stakes a little bit. Like, don't go to that 3 or 4 times in the movie to be like, thank God for the Eternals, or this one kid would have died. But 20 minutes ago, we showed 1,000 people died. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. That's actually a great point. It's like it doesn't show like the like gravity of it, right? Like when it does like a very focused like scene of like maybe that's like something because it was such a slow movie that they were just trying to like loop people in. I don't know.
Yeah, it was definitely like tugging on the heartstrings probably of like parents who are in the audience. Maybe that like resonates more if you're a parent watching this movie, your child seeing a child in danger. But it just seemed like I'm like, as screenwriters, like you should get a little bit more creative and be like, okay, we've already put random child in danger. And I'm telling you, if you go back and rewatch, it's like they did this twice, like even 2 times. Okay, there were like 3 or 4 times that it was like the same exact routine.
It's almost like a John Wick type situation where it's like, okay, there's only so many times I can see someone like kill someone with a fucking pencil. Like, okay, I get it. You're a badass. Like,
Don't
okay,
you
I got
dare.
it.
There is never too many times to watch Keanu Reeves murder some I don't know,
I
Eastern
mean-
European mob members or whatever.
You're telling me, and I know Kate will agree with this, that there's never too many Keanu Reeves like movies, like or scenes. Like, I absolutely agree. And speaking of scenes, obviously there were some things that didn't really make sense. Like, this movie, in my opinion, was a little slow moving. But Kate, was there like a best scene for you? Was there a best scene, a best line? I mean, Noah had a great line earlier. He stole your thunder a little bit. It's fine.
That.
What would you say?
So for the best scene, there wasn't one that like really stuck out to me and grabbed me, but so I put down like the freezing of Tiamat, I think his name is, the celestial that's in Earth or whatever. So basically the ending when Cersei uses her powers, which she feels very unconfident about the whole time. It just seemed like she felt like she was kind of inadequate versus the other Eternals and their powers. So it was kind of cool to see that growth where she felt confident enough as like the new leader to use those to freeze the celestial and basically save the Earth. And I just thought the visuals and like the cinematography of that, like the whole huge hand and stuff coming out of the ocean was really cool. So that was probably my favorite scene.
Okay. What about Brad, Noah? Did you guys have a favorite scene that like differed with that? Like or not even a favorite scene, like was there something that really grabbed your attention that you're like, yo, this is really cool?
No, you go. I do got like mine, and I'm not saying this to like clown. I really thought it was good. Like I did like, I don't want to say a 180 on this movie. The first time I watched it, I didn't really enjoy it. This time I really felt like it was a much better movie. So I'm not saying this as like a backhanded compliment, but I put the best scene, and there were a lot of good scenes, but I put the closing credits when they're going through all the history of the mythology and how like all these like Renaissance paintings were basically recreations of, I was like, why was this not the opening of the film? Like it was so well done, and you can tell, I don't know if it was Jack Kirby doing it in the originals, if it was the filmmakers that did this, but there are certain elements from all these paintings and mythological heroes that they clearly took and put in these heroes. And it was kind of cool to see that, oh, they're saying that like this was inspired by St. George slaying the dragon was really one of the Eternals doing it. I thought that was really cool. And like, it would have been a great opening scene to kind of be like, this is how long they've been around. They've like inspired all these things you don't know about. So I put the closing credits, but that's not meant as like, shade.
Well, that's a great point too, because like obviously like so many like, and that would also like take care of like the idea of so many like cultures around the world of all time have very similar stories. So it's like, like having like the Eternals that are part of it, and like maybe it's like similar stories, so they're trying to help them, like whether it's like create fire or whether it's like a flood or like whatever it might be. So I mean that's like actually like a really great point. But Noah, I know. So I actually like really love that Brad said that he turned a 180. Before this podcast, we were like, yo, Brad and Noah are gonna go like head to head with this. Like they have such different things. But Noah, what was like the best moment for you in the Eternals?
Yeah, so you're exactly right, Kelsey. And Brad admits to turning a 180 here, but his favorite part of the movie was when it was over. Is basically what he just said.
Yeah, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant like the visuals of that was really cool. Not like I'm so glad, but yeah, I felt like so like weird saying that. I'm like, I liked it when the closing credits began to run.
He's like, I liked it when it was fucking over. Like I'm done. I'm over it.
So I feel like was in the minority who actually liked this movie upon first watch, and then when I watched it again, I actually liked it even more. But Brad, I completely agree with what you just said. I think it was really cool how when they talk about when Jon Snow, Dane Whitman is talking to Cersei and about her ex-boyfriend Icarus, and it's the Greek legend of the guy who flew too close to the sun. She's like, oh yeah, Sprite made that up back in the day. And it's like, oh, that's cool how you see how all of these legends, all these stories were inspired by these characters. And so just kind of going down the list a little bit, like Athena, she is based on Greek mythology. Obviously, she's the goddess of war, Athena, right? So that's pretty cool. Makari, based on Roman mythology, based on Mercury, which is Hermes in Greek. Icarus, obviously, as we just talked about, and really apropos, he flies into the sun at the end of the film once he realizes his cause is done, I guess. He lost, whatever. Cersei, inspired by the character Cersei, who had interactions with Odysseus and all that. It's just Gilgamesh, Sumerian. There's so much cool stuff where all of these characters inspired legends and mythology and history all throughout the world. And I think that was, even from the first time, the ones I didn't even realize were something that I enjoyed the most about this.
I love that element of it. Like, I love that. And
going, skipping back a little bit, my favorite scene in the movie was in the third act when that fight scene happened towards the end, and it was kind of Icarus versus Fastos, who was pinning him down. I thought that was really badass, how he's able to invent these things and restrain him. Makari was just such a badass, just beating his ass. Like, she did really well in this fight. And Athena, who was just such a badass. And so kind of the Thea, Fastos, Makari versus Icarus fight on the beach at the end was really cool. So to me, that was my favorite scene.
I did have one other one to add to your list, but I could not find confirmation of this. So if anyone can find if this is why he was named, but Fastos, I think is named, there's like a German myth called Faust, and it's about like a German scientist, and it's basically like the story that inspired that later would inspire Frankenstein, of like messing with things you don't know about and like making scientific advancements before like civilization's ready. So I'm like, it can't be a coincidence that the guy who was making the engine and developed the atomic bomb, as they showed, like, but I could not find anything as to why that character is named Fastos. But I'm like, that has to be a play off of Faust.
Yeah, so what I read was that Fastos was based off of Hephaestus, which was the Greek god and the god of the forge, which played powers as an inventor and creator. And
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
I
always picture him
to
as
be like really ugly and like disfigured.
Yeah, he is like, he lives at the bottom of the thing, but that makes sense. He introduces like fire or like weapons to humanity and stuff. So I'm glad you said that. That's cool.
And really, I think that he was another, to jump backwards a little bit, Fastos, I think, was a candidate for unsung hero, someone I would have liked to see more of. I mean, I think the actor Brian Tyree Henry, he's in Atlanta, which is the show, the Donald Glover show, and he plays the rapper Paperboy, and he's just freaking awesome, and he's just so different from his role in Atlanta compared to his role here, and he's in other things as well, obviously, but he's just a really good actor, and I thought that for the limited screen time he had, he just was really passionate, and really I kind of felt he gave up on humanity after Hiroshima and seeing what they had done with the technology that he brought to the world, and then he found a partner and started a family, and it became the most important thing in the world to him. So I just kind of felt that a little bit, and I think that I would have liked to see a little bit more of him.
Well, and continuing that theme, obviously, like we kind of talked about this a little bit with like Thor, Love and Thunder, of like, like love truly is like the most powerful thing, and like that is what ultimately saves our universe and every universe. And Thor, Gore obviously like finding out like, oh, like truly, like I had so much hate in my heart, and like this was what was like making me like, this was like my my purpose in life, I guess, was like a lot of hate. So like having that and like seeing that, I think is also really important, especially like having that representation too. I think is so important, and that I personally really love like that a lot of movies are doing that, and especially in like movies that are so like, having such a huge reach. Like, and we talked about this before. We're gonna get to this point in a little bit, but we've talked about this before of like, you know, I think like a lot of people like maybe hate on these movies because of that, but we obviously really think it's very important to have that representation. But before we get into that, does anyone have any more just overall positives, things that you loved about this movie? For me, in addition to like, I really liked the individual characters. And to your point, Noah, you made this point earlier, talking about like how like having such a wide cast and being able to like really kind of dive into people and like know like their backgrounds is really rare for such a wide cast, especially like for a group of superheroes. But I love the cinematography of this movie. It was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Like everything was done so well. Like the actors, I think, were perfectly cast. Like, and then obviously too, like having like, you know, we all love Game of Thrones. So having a little Robb Stark and Jon Snow moment was just amazing to me. I love that. But what have we not touched on before? Kate, I think like you obviously like you have said a lot of like great things about this movie. Obviously, you have like the background. It looks great. You look great in this background. Like you look like you should be a part of this movie.
I wish I was in it at all. I'm kind of with Brad, where the first time I watched it, I was not super hype on it. I was kind of like, okay, that was a movie. But the second time that I watched it today, I kind of changed my mind a little bit. I'm like, okay, like I can get into this. This is good. There's like some really good things about this movie. And I agree with the cinematography. Like that was great. I also loved the relationship between Thena and Gilgamesh, like him kind of being her protector while she was like going through this whole, like her mind being taken over by all the memories that she has from other centuries and other lives and everything. I just love that. And I almost wish that was one of my unsung heroes, is I wish they would have like shown a little bit more of that, because their relationship was just so cute, and like it was so brother and sister and very protective. And you know, she goes after the deviant at the end that killed him, and fights him and slices his head in half, which was kind of cool. But yeah, so that was really cool. And I also, upon watching it again, I feel like the first time I was a little confused, like, okay, what's happening here? Who are these people? Why are they on Earth? Like, what is going on? So I understood it a little bit more on the second watch. So I think maybe people just need to do that. But I really liked the complexity on the second watch, because it's such an age-old question and there's not a good answer of what is really the greater good. Is it saving these millions of people on Earth, or is it letting this celestial come out of the Earth so that billions more people, beings, universes can be created? So it was hard almost to like pin down a villain, because I'm like, okay, everybody kind of thinks that they're doing this for the right reason. So I thought that was really interesting, and I like the complexity of that. I feel like it's maybe a little bit more of a philosophical issue, which we sometimes don't see in other MCU movies.
Completely agree.
And especially going back to Thena, like I think that is such a great point too, of like it is almost touching on like mental health, right? And which we don't really see, especially in superhero movies. So like being able to like open that conversation, and we've talked about this a lot, especially in Geek, You'll Find, of being able to have those conversations through like characters that maybe aren't real, like that they're in like another alternate universe or whatever it might be. Just being able to have those conversations. So like I absolutely love that you brought that up. Noah, Brad, was there anything that Kate didn't touch on? Like she absolutely broke that down like perfectly. What was like the positives for you that we haven't touched on yet?
I mean, the other one I would say is just like it's really cool to get to see Jack Kirby's kind of creations put on screen. A lot of his work obviously has been adapted, but you know, if anyone who's not familiar with it, I mean, he basically went from Marvel, creating this kind of Ragnarok type universe in Marvel, went to DC, did New Gods, which I would love to see adapted one day, and then went back to Marvel, which is when he kind of really went further in depth in the Eternals to kind of like round it out. So Jack Kirby was a big expert about mythology. So it was really cool getting to see how much of that. And I think that gets taken for granted a lot is people are like, oh, how cool these filmmakers like did this and they made it Icarus because this. And then like we forget sometimes like they're adapting work that like was done before. So I think Jack Kirby, I don't know if he counts as an unsung hero because hopefully he's not unsung, but you know, I think he's definitely someone like worth recognizing.
What for you, Noah?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that I respect the movie because it was just so ambitious. And the things that they did, Chloe Zhao is the director, and I think, listen, is this a perfect movie? Well, no, obviously not. Like it was slow at times. It's a little bit too long. There's a lot of other flaws of the movie, but the movie was really ambitious. What they did with the characters. I mean, we haven't even talked about the sex scene. I don't think there's been a sex scene, a straight up sex scene in an MCU movie before.
That was crazy.
I thought of that when I was rewatching. I was like, I don't remember. I remember it being talked about, but I just forgotten about it. And then when we were rewatching it, I was kind of like, this has to be the first time there's like sex in a Marvel movie, right?
Kind of like bookmark.
I mean, I'm like Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, yeah, but this is like Disney Marvel. I'm like, I don't remember this.
Yeah, but not in a movie, right?
Right.
I don't know. I thought that like even just things like that. I mean, they did things that hadn't been done before, and I think that things like that, whenever anybody in whatever they're doing, whatever project, anytime they try to do something new, like they should have some respect about that, and I think that's pretty cool for them to do. And just beyond that, the fact that Phastos is an openly gay character, and not in the way that people are outraged about when things like that get brought into movies like this, and there's boycotting, and there's maybe people will say that a reason that this is ranked so lowly on ranked so low on Rotten Tomatoes or wherever else is because people are offended about certain things like that. But I don't know. I mean, this was not just a kiss at the end of the movie. I mean, he was an openly gay character who was one of the main characters of the movie. And I think that that's something that you do not normally see in a superhero, a Disney movie like this. So I just think the movie was ambitious. But really, again, anytime you can have Jon Snow and Robb Stark talking about Cersei.
Yeah.
Well, that's just wild to me. Like
Yeah,
it just
so
that was my number one takeaway the first time I saw it. Is like, oh my God, they are both in love with Cersei. Jon Snow and Robb Stark, different spelling of Cersei, but still like, holy shit, that was pretty cool. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
It's kind of
confused me so much the first time.
What?
I was just saying, I think that's what confused me so much the first time. Of, like, I felt like stuff happening of like these characters and Cersei. I had no background of this, like obviously, like you guys touched upon. What were you gonna say, Kate?
Just one last little note also about like the positives and stuff. I remember when I heard that there was a movie coming out, a Marvel movie with Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek, and then whatever their real names are, Robb Stark's real name, Kit Harington. Worst fan. I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is a cast. Like I could not believe like those A-listers were gonna be in this huge like Marvel movie. So like that's another like really cool thing that like I would never expect.
Yeah.
It's kind of mind-blowing to me, honestly, that like mind-boggling, I guess, is that we're having this discussion of because this movie's ranked the lowest. Like of all the things we're saying we liked about it, I'm like, I fail to remember that the reason we're having it, it's ranked the lowest Marvel movie. Like, come on, like there's no way this is,
It's kind of crazy to think that too, because as we're talking about this now and just thinking about the themes and just really the tone of our moods and the things that we said during this podcast and comparing it to the tones and the themes of the podcast we did previously about Thor, Love and Thunder, which we all liked.
Yeah.
I feel like we were way more negative talking about that movie than we have been about this one.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah. And I think too, because like obviously like this was so new to us too, like opening like the like idea of like the Celestials and Eternals and stuff like that. So it was a ground level movie, right? Like that we just are not always used to. And as we talked about in Thor before, like they just really made a joke of like his character that I think was like big. But speaking of that, you guys, you all touched upon this as you guys were talking, but why does the Eternals have the hate that it has? we are all, like, to your point, Noah, we are talking so positively about this movie. It has a fucking A-list celebs. Like, it moves slow sometimes, but what movie doesn't, especially now that it's like, oh, that's like, we should, like, we have these movies that go 2.5, 3 hours. That's what it is nowadays. Why does the Eternals have the hate that it has? Why does it have a 49, maybe 46%? I'm great at research. Why does it have this below 50% ranking on Rotten Tomatoes? Why does it have the #1 spot of the worst MCU movie? In my opinion, it doesn't belong there.
To me, it's absolutely insane that the next lowest ranking movie, Thor: The Dark World, which is the second Thor movie, is almost 20 percentage points higher ranked than this one. It's insane to me. It really is. And I think that to an extent, I know this might sound insulting, but I compare this a little bit with the first Suicide Squad movie, where the movie itself was more about introducing the characters, developing the characters, telling the story of the characters coming together, and it wasn't as much about the storyline. And this kind of was like that a little bit, where it was more important to establish all these characters, which it was. It was an origin story. No one knew about these characters before. And so they had a lot of heavy lifting to do in terms of bringing these characters together, establishing who they are, making you care about them. And so some of the things within the storyline were kind of second fiddle, hence the kind of lackluster villains, the deviants, and so on and so on. But overall, I mean, I was an Eternals apologist from the beginning. I liked it even more upon second review. It's, again, not one of the best. I think it's a middle of the road, but really, I'd put this somewhere around Age of Ultron for me personally. We're somewhere around Age of Ultron, which is saying a lot, considering you have a lot of very popular, very established characters. I know Age of Ultron was disappointing, and we might have an episode dedicated to that later on. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this movie.
I agree, Noah. I think like there was a lot of heavy lifting because they had to really establish from the very beginning of like who these people were, what they were doing. I think it could have been broken up more, and I think that would have made it more enjoyable. But Kate, what do you think? Like, what were your overall thoughts of like why you think like this has the worst? This should not be the worst ranked MCU movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I cannot believe it's like at the bottom of the list. Like that's crazy. But I think the reason is because, kind of like Noah said, like you're just establishing these characters from the ground up. People don't know them, like other MCU movies. We know the characters, like we've grown to love them like over time. So it coming in brand new, I think that's hard to connect with people and to get them like interested, even though these are really interesting characters. I think it's a little bit more serious than other MCU movies. Like there's not as much humor. Of course, there's like some funny lines in there, but nothing that made me like LOL like other movies.
Guffaw.
So.
You're not guffawing.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit more serious, and it's also less related to the MCU. Like all the other movies, I feel like they're pretty like intertwined. They're all about characters that are like in the Avengers, are related to the Avengers. So we're very much like in that world, and we know all of the like little Easter eggs and the references that they make. And they did make some references to Thanos and the blip and the Avengers not having a leader, which was kind of funny. But I think that's also something that people look for now, and it wasn't really in this movie. Like it's just not as related to the other MCU movies, and I feel like people miss that.
But like I think like that's kind of enjoyable too. Like, like we talk about this a lot of like, watching these movies. And if you miss, like, so for example, like if you miss Spider-Man 2, you miss a lot when it's Spider-Man No Way Home. Like you miss a lot. You can still watch it, but you're missing a lot of those insider information, right? So being able to have like this new storyline that still kind of ties in my opinion, I think is really great. But Brad, like obviously you referenced earlier that you made a complete 180 on this movie. Why do you think it has so much hate? Obviously, like, I mean, we all watched it. We actually all watched it together originally in the theaters. Was it in the theaters or did we all watch it at Noah's
We
house?
watched it at Noah's house while he
We
was
watched
gone.
Which is
I watched
basically like, yeah, basically like a
I
theater.
watched
Crash Noah's
You
play.
watched it at my house when I was not even there.
Oh yeah. So it was like a theater for us. It was a free theater for us. But you did a 180 on this movie. Obviously, we all had our opinions about it the very first time we watched. We all rewatched. What changed for you, and why do you think people hate it so much, or not even hate it, but just don't like it as much as others?
It's hard to say like what changed for me. Maybe part of it is knowing some scenes are going to be slow. Okay, we're about to have a 10-minute fight the monster in the forest scene, and maybe like expecting those scenes to be like, okay, like I know like this is going to happen, but it's okay because the overall story is really cool, and I really do like like Kate said, the philosophical like kind of debates, and that to me was the best like part of the movie. So I think I was a little bit more willing to like sit through those scenes that are a random fight scene. I'm like, nothing big is gonna come out of this fight scene right now.
It's not
So
changing to the movie.
yeah, like so I think I just had more patience for those kind of scenes. And there's a lot of movies I like feel that way about. Like I go back and watch like the Star Wars like original prequels, and I like them a lot more now because I know where the overall story is going. It's okay to like just sit through like the kind of bad parts and be like, okay, as a whole, I enjoy this, so I'm willing
The
to kind
prequels
of.
don't have puppets though. Is that okay with you?
That has to be, man. George Lucas really steered away. Actually, I do have something about the puppets, but I'm not. No,
If you talk about puppets every episode, I swear to God, like
no. You've all lost that chance now. You've all lost that chance. But
no,
as to why it gets the hate, I hope it's a little bit more of what Kate talked about, that it isn't something that's kind of tied in and, oh, this happened because of this. I would hope it's because of that and a little less because of the diversity, because there's, like a homosexual relationship in it. Sometimes I worry that these are the reasons that fans go on there and like tank these movies. So if I want to say positive, it's going to be a little bit more of what Kate talked about in terms of like people going in being like, oh, I want to see like Iron Man make an appearance. And it's like, it's not that movie. It's not supposed to be that kind of movie.
Yeah, I agree. I hope it's not like that either. I don't think it deserves the hate. I think we all agree on that. Kate referenced this a little bit earlier. There were some Easter eggs in this movie. There's definitely some things that maybe suggest that we're going to see more of the Eternals and that it's going to tie in more into the MCU that we all know and love. Who wants to talk about those Easter eggs? Because I'm terrible at them. So.
I'll take some of that.
Noah.
So first
Let's
off,
go, Noah.
in an interview recently, actually, just in the last couple of weeks, Patton Oswalt, who voiced the Pip the Troll character, who honestly, this was on my list for cringiest moment, was the fact that I'm gonna go back on that. The CGI throughout this movie was really good, I thought, for the most part. I just really like the animations of like somehow like their costumes and like the way that the weapons on specifically Athena's were made. It was just really cool. In that post-credit scene where the troll came in, voiced by Patton Oswalt, that was cringe bad. I thought it's like they had literally no money left and they're just like, crap.
I told Kate the same thing.
They mailed it in on Pip.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't know, like it was so different from the rest of the movie. I don't understand. It was so bad. It was really embarrassing.
Yeah.
Anyway, he confirmed in an interview that there will be a sequel to this movie. So we have not seen the last of the Eternals. It will be directed again by Chloe Zhao. So happy about that, I guess. But in terms of some Easter eggs, I have two big ones. The first one is revolving about our boy Jon Snow, aka Kit Harington, aka Dane Whitman. So he plays a character in the Marvel universe called the Black Knight, and it's kind of strange. It's all tied into King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and stuff like that. But his family exists all the way through that kind of bloodline, and it's even theorized that he is a cousin or something of King Arthur himself. So he says it at the end that, oh, my family history is complicated, Cersei. Okay, but that's what they kind of hint to there. And anyway, he plays the Black Knight, and you see in the post-credit scene where he actually opens up a case that contains what's called the Ebony Blade. The Ebony Blade is very similar to what we talked about in the last podcast with the Necro Sword, the all black. The Necro Sword is what Gore had, which is a sword that's all powerful and it corrupts the person that is holding it. So it's something that when you hold it, you're cursed. And that's why he said, like, I have to try something. And then he opens and grabs the sword and you hear a voice. That voice is actually of my guy, Marshala Ali, who is going to be the next Blade. And so we haven't seen him yet, but he says, quote, so are you sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman? And that's a big tie-in to what could potentially be happening with him turning into the Black Knight. I don't know, teaming up with Blade, who knows? But there obviously is going to be a future in the MCU for Kit Harington and his character of Dane Whitman. So that's one big Easter egg there. The next one is about my other guy, Harry Styles, who showed up in the second post-credit scene with the terrible CGI role, and introduces himself as Eros, aka Star Fox, who is Thanos' brother. Obviously, Harry Styles looks a lot different than Thanos did. There's conversations about how they're both Eternals. Thanos had a gene, a deviant gene or something like that to make Thanos look different. But it looks like Eros is going to be helping out the Eternals to find now Cersei, Pip, and I don't know, whichever other one gets kidnapped and held captive at the end of the movie by the Celestials. So we'll see. But those are two Easter eggs about the future and where the Eternals fit into the MCU going forward.
That's definitely a lot to unpack there. I mean, do you guys, so I think you actually kind of already touched on this, but where do we go from here? Do we think we're going to see more of the Eternals in the next MCU movies? Do we think that they're going to be like, you know, do we think that it's going to go back into time? You reference a bit in Eternals and they reference Thanos, obviously, like you see Harry Styles, who I think, in my opinion, I think they look exactly alike. So I don't know what you're talking about. So
Look at
where do we think that we're going to go from here?
Both of them.
I would love to see a section on Harry Styles. Thank you. This is a family podcast, Noah. So how dare you make me say that? How dare you make me say that, Noah? No, but like, where do we go from here? Like, I mean, before we like kind of reference what we're going to do next week, which is going to be very fun, in my opinion, where do we go from here? Do we think the Eternals, was it just something like trying to just test the waters? Were they just trying to see, is it popular? Is it not? Like, do they not even give a shit about them anymore? Like, because it was like a 49% rated movie? Like, what's going to happen? Brad, let's hear your thoughts, because you are definitely the comic book guy.
Well, you know, Noah said they're coming back for Eternals 2, which I'm excited about. I think there's still like a lot they could do with these characters. Obviously, you know, it kind of, oddly enough, other than the first Avengers and Infinity War, I can't think of a movie that ended on like a bleaker tone, kind of. You know, it's one of the few movies, I mean, even Guardians of the Galaxy, like, has closure to it. You know, all these movies seem to have closure. I would say this movie had the least closure to it, aside from Infinity War, in terms of, okay, like the heroes just got kidnapped at the end of this. They're gonna stand trial. Like, what is gonna happen next? So it's definitely deserving of a sequel, and I'm glad it's gonna get one to kind of tie up those ends. A lot of times, I haven't looked at this list, but there's a list of like post-credit scenes that really never went anywhere. And I think we all remember the ones that, oh, that was great. That one set up this one. But there's also a list out there of a few of them that like never really went anywhere. And I was really hoping this wouldn't be one of those movies that like Marvel just kind of scraps and forgets about and says, we're going to go a completely different direction.
I agree. Like, I'm actually excited. Like, to your guys' point, like, I actually liked it better on the rewatch. Like, just like every other movie, I thought there was definitely things that could be cut. I think that there was things that could be added. It was a lot slower for me, but I'm glad that it was more of a serious tone. So I really enjoyed that, especially because, you know, when you talk about Eternals and you talk about like, you know, the history of like gods, like it's not just Greek like mythology. It's not just Roman mythology. It's like, they talk about Mesopotamia and like all these different things. So like I really did enjoy that. Before we wrap things up, Kate, do you have anything that you wanted to say about like where do you think this is going? Do you or even where do you hope that it's going? Like what, like as a fan watching this movie, what do you hope is going to come out of this?
Yeah, kind of like Brad said, I mean, I thought it was really interesting that they left it literally wide open. Like it was like a cliffhanger, basically. So that was really interesting. And they left it open for Eternals too. So I definitely hope that they're in the works with that, because I think it'd be really interesting, because I know Makari and Druid were actually going to other universes to break free the other Eternals. So like that's really interesting. Like I want to know more about that, and if they have resistance there, or like what's going on. If they could build like an army of Eternals or something, like that'd be cool. So I don't know. Yeah, we'll see where it goes. The post-credit scenes were really interesting. Harry Styles as a superhero, like I didn't expect that either. Like that's kind of crazy to me, but I'm interested to see where it goes.
And I'll say one more thing. I think that obviously this is a departure from the way it is in the comics, but the Celestials reminded me a lot, especially how they depict them kind of looming over Earth, and particularly in that final scene where Arishem, who is the Prime Celestial, is kind of in there talking to Cersei and them about, do humans deserve to live? You saved them, but I'll be the one to judge through your memories if they deserve to stay alive. That's just kind of a wild concept to me. And it reminded me a lot of Galactus. And really, if they kind of change some things in the MCU to make Galactus a Celestial or something like that, then they could tie in the Fantastic Four with the Eternals. They could tie in a lot of different things and really start bringing everything together, which would be really interesting to me.
That's actually a great point, Noah. And like even like that also kind of like ties into like Thanos and like his like thinking too. So of him being like, yo, like we literally are overpopulated. Like this is the only way that like the human race is going to survive. Like this is the only way that is possible. So it just opens up that idea of like, when we talk about maybe not all villains are bad or come from a bad place. Like they come from somewhere that they think is going to help in the long run. That's just in their own way.
Well, again, Ereshem's design was to destroy Earth and destroy these one-off planets, but in order to sacrifice that and bring about an entire galaxy and millions and millions and millions of people and creatures and whatever the hell. So exactly, the philosophical question of, is that sacrifice worth it?
Yeah, it was that was a really good like question on it. Like I really thought they did a good job of that too. And I wish it would have brought up the point, like it is interesting as much as you're like, what a monster, he's gonna destroy all of Earth. But like how many people have lived, and maybe the movie was trying to get at this, but how many people like have lived full lifetimes on this Earth? It was, it's a tragedy for the people who live on Earth at the time in which this would happen. But there are plenty of people who lived great lives and full lives. So it wasn't like he created Earth and then 10 years later was like, okay, so like I really just thought that was good, that was kind of like you understood why different heroes kind of questioned it and felt differently about it. It was believable.
Yep.
And to your point, it's like the quality of life as well, right? Just because someone's living a life, like, or even a full life doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a quality life, which is something obviously that we're battling even to this day.
For sure. Where we going next, Kelsey? What are we doing next week?
Next week, let's wrap it up. Okay, so obviously, I think we all agree that Eternals does not deserve the ranking that it is. So next week, we are taking a little break from the MCU universe. I personally am so excited. I hope that it is something that is going to be worth talking about, and like that is going to be a continuation of such an amazing series. Going to break down the very first episode of House of the Dragon. So we hope that you guys tune in. Obviously, we are going to break it down, just kind of talk about our initial thoughts and feelings. Obviously, talk a little bit about how Game of Thrones ended, where we are at with, House of the Dragon. It's obviously a prequel to everything that we saw in Game of Thrones itself. But you guys, what are you thinking? Really quick, let's like just do a quick roundtable. I'm excited. I hope they don't fuck it up. I love Game of Thrones. I love I love that family. Kate, what are you most excited for with House of the Dragon?
Well, I mean, I thought the trailers were good. They got me pretty excited. Like, I don't know, they got some good actors, and like actually there's only one actor that I knew. It was the guy from Doctor Who, and Morbius.
Morbius.
So bad decision in the portfolio there, but maybe we'll do a podcast on Morbius. But anyway, I think it's kind of cool that like a lot of the other actors are fairly like unknown. Like I didn't know who they were. So and I also heard that George R.R. Martin was a big like component of this, of making it. So that gives me a lot of hope, because obviously when he's involved, it's his work. Like he did a lot of great work on, you know, the early seasons of Game of Thrones. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm excited.
I love it. Noah, you've never read the book, so what are you thinking?
I am cautiously optimistic. I love Game of Thrones. I don't know if you know this about me, but I was actually deemed king in the north at the Game of Thrones tour in Northern Ireland. I don't know if, did I not tell you that story? That's for another time. But I am cautiously optimistic about it. I'm trying not to build it up too much in my head, because we did that with Game of Thrones. We all love that, and I just hope that it can get it to be a something that's talked about positively again amongst society, because GOT not as much anymore.
Brad?
I am optimistic, not even hopelessly optimistic, because unlike Game of Thrones, there's a clear beginning, middle, and end to the story already, and they're adapting work that already exists and aren't gonna have to figure things out as they go and be like, oh crap, I kind of was hoping George R. R. Martin would have like told us what's gonna happen next. Like this is a point in history, kind of like Andor from Star Wars, and like all these, like I always feel comfortable at it when it's like, okay, we already know where this has to go, but how can we make it interesting in the time being? So you know, kind of like the Titanic movie. I don't know why that's the reference I thought of. Like they knew what the end of that movie was gonna be.
Or
They knew what the end of that movie was gonna be, but they were like, how do we make it interesting in the meanwhile? And like it seems like most movies and shows like that have a good track history.
Okay. Well, one thing I'll say real quick is that it is an exciting time coming up, because as we just detailed, we're going to be talking about Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, first episode next week. But before that, in this next week coming up, She-Hulk Attorney at Law premieres first episode on Thursday, August 18th. And then Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon comes out this coming Sunday, August 21st. Following that will be the first episode of Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, which will be Friday, September 2nd. So I'm very excited for that one as well. There is a $465 million budget for the first season of the Lord of the Rings show. So, hey, that's another one, cautiously optimistic, but I'm excited.
Lots of CGI, that means not enough puppets, but
not enough puppets. Never enough.
There's never enough in the budget for puppet, according to Brad. So we're going to leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Please let us know your thoughts. What are you excited for this upcoming week? Obviously, there is a lot of geeky news happening. We talked about a little bit Game of Thrones. We're going to talk about House of the Dragon next week. We are working on a Game of Thrones docu-series that's coming up in the Geek and You Shall Find universe. We have our own universe. So make sure to subscribe. We're at Superhero Faces on Twitter, as well as Facebook, as well as superhero_faces on Instagram. Please make sure to like, subscribe, share your comments too as well in the comments below. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you all for joining us today. You have absolutely amazing thoughts, way more than I would ever think about Eternals. So we will see you next week right here for Geek and You Shall Find, the podcast. See you there.
cheers.
Cheers.